Hi everybody, my name is Tristan Smith and I'm a Boca Bearings sponsored athlete, and today I'm going to show you how to replace the bearings on your hub. Now that we have the hub disassembled, we're ready to take out the bearings. The setup I have here is a couple 2x4s, and what I've done is I'm straddling the hub on those 2x4s such that most of the hub flange is being supported by the 2x4, but I still have enough gap between the 2x4s that it will allow the bearing to pass through when I punch it out on the other side. And one of the reasons for using wood is that you don't want to mar the finish of your hub by applying that force to it. You wouldn't want to use a couple blocks of steel or put this in a vise or anything, because what's going to end up happening is that side of the flange there is going to get all chewed up. So what you want to do is you want to start at the 12 o'clock position on the opposing bearing, or the bottom side bearing, and what you want to do is give it a tap or two at the 12 o'clock position, at the 6 o'clock position, at the 9 o'clock position, and then finally at the 3 o'clock position, in that order. And the reason I'm specific about that is that you want that bearing to come out as straight as possible. If I was to just put the screwdriver in here and just bash away and I'm only hitting that 12 o'clock position every time, what's going to end up happening is that bearings are going to come out cockeyed, and that's going to ovalize the opening in your bearing, or in your hub I should say, and basically your hub is garbage at that point. So you want to be very careful in this step to remove the bearing as slowly as possible. The more you're alternating there, the safer it's going to be for you removing that bearing, and the chances of you ovalizing the hub are quite slim if you do this slowly and properly. So what I'm going to do is start at the 12 o'clock position, a couple light taps, over to the 6 o'clock position, a couple light taps, over to the 9 o'clock position, a couple light taps, and finally to the 3 o'clock position, a couple more taps. And I'm going to keep going around that rotation until the bearing comes out. And each time oh, that was actually quite quick. You may have to do that several times, going around in that pattern before the bearing does pop out. This particular one was coming out quite easy. And the one thing you want to remember about this method also of removal is that the bearing, once it gets popped out, chances are pretty good this is garbage, because what we have done to remove it is we're actually hitting this surface here, and I can see in this particular bearing that the seal has been damaged in doing so. So this is not a method you want to use if you want to retain those bearings for future use. The second method you can use to remove your bearing is to use what's called a blind hole puller. Blind hole puller looks like this. They come in varying sizes, and you basically want to get the size that has an end that will pass through your bearing. And basically what this tool does is you'll put it through your bearing, and then you'll turn the chuck at the end here, and what that does is that'll pass a shaft through the end here. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but the end is basically cut into 4 sections, and what will happen is that as that shaft is coming up through there, that will force the end to splay out, and that end is what's going to grip the inside diameter of the bearing on the inside. So I'll show you in a second here what that looks like when it's inside the bearing. Okay, and now I have the tool on the inside of the hub bearing, and I'm going to keep turning that until the end splays out. And now it's quite tight, and what I'll do with it now is put it on to the end of this shaft. And now what I'll do is hold on to the hub shell itself, and this tool has a shaft here and this large weight, and what I do is I end up pulling that weight to the end of the shaft, and once it hits that dead end, that's what's going to apply the pressure to remove the bearing from the hub. So I'll just do that now. And there we have the bearing removed from the hub. And it's just sitting on the end of the shaft, and now I can reduce the diameter of that shaft again, and then I'm going to be able to get my bearing off there. Okay, now I'm able to remove the bearing from the end of the blind hole puller. I've reduced the shaft diameter, and it should just pop right off the end there. And now I have a perfectly usable bearing again. So this again is the method you'll want to use if you do want to retain that bearing for future use. Now we're ready to reinstall the bearings. One of the tools we can use to do so is the Universal Bike Bearing Installer from Boca Bearings. Basically what that's comprised of is a series of nylon pieces that are in varying diameters. And what you want to do is match up one of these pieces with the outside diameter of your bearing on the bearing side that you're pushing in. And on the opposite side, you basically want one of these nylon pieces that is at least a little larger than the hole on the other side. If you don't have one of these nylon pieces that matches exactly to the outside diameter of your bearing, your best bet then is to actually use one of your original bearings to use on top of your new bearing to install or to press in. In my particular case, I don't have a nylon piece that does match the exact outside diameter, so I'm going to use my original bearing there to push that back in. Okay, now I've got my bearing install tool set up, and what I've done here is I've got my new bearing on the inside, I've got my old bearing just outside of that, and then I've got the nylon piece which is just slightly larger than the outside diameter of my bearing. And on the opposite side, I've got another nylon piece, and the way I've chosen this one is I'm just making sure that the diameter of this one is larger than the hole for the bearing. And I'm basically ready now to press my bearing back in. A couple things you want to note before starting to do so is you want to make sure that everything is lined up as straight as possible so that when you start to press the bearing back in, it goes in straight. So what I'm going to do now is grab my 6mm hex key, insert that into one side, and my 13mm wrench on the other, and I'm just going to gently tighten that. And as I'm doing so, I'm keeping an eye on this side here to make sure that that bearing is going in straight. So far so good, it's going in quite straight. And you basically want to keep going until you start to feel some resistance, and then you maybe want to go 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn past that, and that's basically the point where your bearing has come to a dead stop. And once you reach that point, you want to start backing off all the pieces, and your bearing is now installed. And now we just want to do the same thing for the opposite end.